Story 1. The Static Visitor. I started working from home after I got laid off from my job in Denver and picked up freelance editing gigs. I lived alone in a small single-bedroom rental house about 15 minutes from Boulder. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those outdated brick ranch-style homes with thin windows and a creaky floor. But it was cheap and tucked away at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. I was used to the silence. Actually, I liked it. I kept to myself. My hours were weird, and my schedule revolved around client deadlines, so being alone didn't really bother me. Until it did. It started with the TV. I use an old TV in my bedroom. The kind with a built-in VHS player. Real nostalgic stuff. It wasn't even hooked up to cable, but I liked having it on for background noise. I'd throw in a tape or let static run when I wanted white noise. One night, I finished editing a corporate training video for a real estate firm. Mind-numbingly boring stuff. It was around 2:00 a.m. and I was getting ready to crash when I heard voices coming from the static. Not faint whispers, clear voices. A man and a woman arguing. Not shouting, more like whispering harshly, like they were trying not to be heard. It was warped, crackly, hard to make out, but it was there. Not a tape, not anything I'd put in. I stared at the screen. The static didn't change, but the voices got sharper for a second, and I swear I heard one of them say, "He can hear us." Then silence. I turned the TV off and just sat there in the dark for a few minutes, heart thumping. I told myself I was just overtired, that maybe a neighbor's signal bled into mine somehow, even though the TV wasn't connected to anything. But the next night I left it on again. This time there were no voices, just a low hum. And behind the hum, what sounded like breathing. I turned it off fast. By the fourth night, I stopped using the TV. But that's when other things started happening. My doorbell rang at exactly 3:03 a.m. one night. I didn't move at first. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac. Nobody comes by this late. The Ring camera didn't catch anything. Just static. Literally, a black and white haze, like the feed was being scrambled. Another night, I found my front door slightly open. Not kicked in, not wide open, just enough that the latch hadn't caught. I locked it myself before bed. I'm obsessive about it. Then I started hearing it. That same whisper from the static. He can hear us. Only this time it wasn't coming from the TV. It was coming from the hallway. I started keeping my phone in my hand while I slept. I started placing tripwire-style objects in front of the doors. A glass of water, a pile of coins. Just something to make noise if it moved. Then one night, the coins were scattered. But I didn't wake up. I only noticed in the morning. It got worse after that. The TV in the living room, the newer one, turned on by itself. Full volume. Static. I unplugged it. Next night, the microwave beeped at 3:03 a.m. like someone had used it. Every single night. Something small. But something wrong. I finally got so paranoid, I called a friend to stay over. Max. He thought I was being dramatic, but he came anyway. We played Xbox, drank beers, and crashed out in the living room. Around 2:50 a.m., the TV started humming again. I hadn't plugged it back in. Then Max woke me up. "Dude," he whispered, "someone's outside." There was movement in the hallway, like a shadow pacing. We heard one step creak, then stop. We froze. Then, 3:03 a.m., on the dot, we heard it. That same whisper, like it was being filtered through the walls. "He can see us now." We didn't sleep after that. Max was pale. We called the cops, but the house was locked up and there was no sign of anyone inside. But my ring footage, just static, again. I moved out 2 days later, broke my lease, paid the penalty, left half my stuff. And the worst part, the static never left. 2 nights ago, at my new apartment, different neighborhood, different city, I turned on my phone to check a voice memo I'd recorded for work. There was a background hum in it I didn't remember, and underneath the hum, barely audible, was the same voice. He moved again. Story 2. The Upstairs Tenant. I've lived in Salem since college. It's a historic town, beautiful in the fall, crawling with tourists during October. The irony is, despite its reputation, it's not really that spooky. Or at least, that's what I thought. Last year, I moved into a duplex on the edge of the historic district. The house was ancient, creaky floors, leaded windows, clawfoot tubs. But it had character and charm. And the rent was dirt cheap, probably because of how old the place was. The landlord lived out of state and mostly left me alone, which I loved. I work from home, so peace and quiet are all I really care about. When I first moved in, I asked if the unit above mine was occupied. He said it was vacant and had been for some time. They were still fixing it up. That was fine with me. Less noise, no annoying upstairs neighbors. Or so I thought. About a month into living there, I started hearing sounds coming from the second floor. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. At first, I wrote it off as the building settling, or raccoons, or maybe even echoes of my own movements. Old houses can be weird that way. But then, it started getting louder. Furniture dragging, like someone was pushing a heavy armoire across the floor. Then footsteps, then silence. I texted my landlord, "Hey, did you rent the upstairs unit yet?" He replied a few hours later, "Nope, still vacant." "You sure you're not hearing the radiators?" It wasn't the radiators. I started recording the sounds on my phone at night. Most of the recordings were inconclusive. Creaks, thumps, indistinct movement. But one night, something clear came through. A voice, whispering. I had to listen 10 times before I could make it out. It was a man's voice, hoarse and gravelly, saying, "She's still awake." I can't explain the kind of fear that runs through you when you hear that in your own home, when you know no one should be upstairs. I called the police that night. They searched the entire building. Nothing. Doors locked, windows secure. They said maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I had a sleep disorder. They were polite but dismissive. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, started keeping a kitchen knife next to the bed, started drinking a little too much wine at night just to fall asleep. Then things escalated. One morning, I woke up to find muddy boot prints in my kitchen. Not mine. I hadn't left the house the night before. They led from the basement door, which I never opened, to the fridge, and then stopped. The door was still locked from the inside. I called my landlord again, furious. He insisted no one had a key. I asked about the upstairs unit again. Same answer. Vacant. So I asked about the attic. He went quiet for a few seconds before replying. There is no attic access. That part of the house was sealed off years ago. That was a lie. I'd seen a pull cord in the upstairs hallway ceiling when I moved in. One of those old-school attic entrances with a ladder. But I had no way to get to it because I didn't have a key to the upstairs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening for movement, and at exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard a click, like a latch unlocking, then creaking, slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. But I never heard a door open. It was like the sound was inside my apartment already. I called 911 without hesitation. I didn't even speak. I just left the phone on and crawled into the back of the closet. By the time the cops arrived, the sounds had stopped. This time, I demanded they check the upstairs unit. I told them about the attic cord. They broke in. There was no furniture, no bed, no lights. But in the far corner of the upstairs hallway was a hatch. The cord was missing, as if someone had ripped it off from the inside. They opened it. The attic was cramped, barely tall enough to stand in. But tucked in the corner, half covered by insulation, was a tattered blanket and a stack of audio cassette tapes, each labeled with a date. The most recent one was from the night before. I never found out who was up there or for how long. The landlord refused to give me details. The police said the tapes were being looked into, but I never heard anything after that. I moved out 2 days later. Didn't even wait for my lease to end. But some nights, around 3 a.m., I still wake up suddenly, just knowing someone is listening. Story 3. The Man in the Monitor. I live alone in a tiny studio apartment in downtown LA, right above a corner liquor store. It's one of those places that's charming in the way only people who've never lived poor describe things. Cracked windows, paper-thin walls, the faint smell of burnt plastic that never quite goes away. Still, I liked it. It was cheap, and I worked from home. I mostly did freelance video editing, so I was on my computer for 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. Just me, 2 monitors, and a little kitchen that never saw much use. Everything changed the day I bought a new webcam. I only got it because one of my clients insisted on Zoom calls instead of emails. It was a basic USB webcam, nothing fancy. I installed it, tested it, forgot about it. But that night, while reviewing a clip I had been editing, I noticed something weird. See, part of the editing software has a tiny window, like a thumbnail, that shows a live preview of your camera feed, just in case you're recording reaction footage. and in that thumbnail I could see myself and someone standing behind me. I froze. The figure was faint, barely visible, just the top of a head. No face, no movement. I spun around in my chair. Nothing. Heart pounding, I replayed the video. The figure was gone. I chalked it up to glitching. Some artifact or weird lighting thing. I turned off the webcam, unplugged it, and tried to forget about it. But the next night it happened again. This time the figure was clearer. A man, pale, standing in the corner of my apartment. Just standing, staring. The footage wasn't even recording. The preview window was live. I turned around again. Nothing. It kept happening, night after night. At first, he stayed in the corner. Then he got closer. Sometimes I'd glance at the screen and see him standing right behind me, like I could feel his breath. I unplugged the webcam, bought a new one, different brand. Same thing. I covered it with tape. He still appeared. Then I stopped seeing him in the camera and started seeing him in the mirrors. In the black of my TV when it was off, reflected in my laptop screen when I wasn't even using the webcam. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I left all the lights on, all the time. My friends thought I was burning out. They said I'd been editing too much. One of them suggested I take a break and visit family, but I couldn't leave. I knew he'd follow me, or worse, stay here and wait. I tried cleansing the place, sage, salt lines, holy water. I don't even believe in that stuff, but at that point I was desperate. Nothing worked. Then one night, I decided to face it, to see if it was all in my head. I turned off every light in the apartment, sat in front of my monitor, and waited. The screen was dark, reflecting my silhouette. Then he appeared, standing directly behind me. I didn't move, didn't blink. He slowly raised one arm, skeletal, pale, and rested a hand on my shoulder. I felt it, cold, pressure, fingers. I screamed, turned around. Again, nothing. But the next morning, something changed. There were handprints on my shoulders, red, bruised. He touched me. He was real, or at least real enough. I haven't used that computer since. I turned it off and covered the screens, got a flip phone, stopped editing, stopped working. But it doesn't matter. He's not in the screen anymore. He's in the room. Sometimes I wake up to the sound of the monitor turning on by itself. The screen flickers, then stabilizes. It shows my room from a new angle, from the inside of the closet. Story 4. The red light in the vents. I moved into this house 6 months ago. It's an old 2-story Victorian just off campus in Ann Arbor. Close enough to walk to the university, but far enough that it's quiet at night. The rent was absurdly cheap for the size of the place, but I chalked it up to being old, slightly drafty, and having no central air. My roommate was supposed to move in back in September, but she dropped out last minute and never showed. I debated finding someone new, but decided I liked having the space to myself. More privacy. I'm a night owl, and grad school means long nights, up reading, researching, writing. The weird stuff didn't start until late October. It began with sounds in the vents, like something crawling slowly through the air ducts. Not rats, not raccoons. The sounds were too deliberate. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Old house, expanding pipes, etc. But then I started hearing whispering, only at night. Only when the house was completely silent. It was coming from the floor vent by my bed, just barely audible, like someone speaking from very far away. At first, I thought maybe it was the neighbors, but the houses on the street aren't that close together. I even tried recording the whispering with my phone. Nothing picked up. Every time I pressed record, it stopped. Then one night, I noticed a faint red light coming from the vent. Tiny, pin-sized, it pulsed slowly. I leaned in close, thinking maybe it was some kind of reflection or a piece of wire someone left behind. But then it moved, shifted slightly, like a blink. I stumbled back from the vent and didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I removed the cover. Inside, just dark, narrow ductwork. I reached in with my phone light and shined it down. Nothing. No red light, no wires, no camera. But that night, the light came back. Now in the living room vent, then the bathroom vent, always pulsing, always watching, and always disappearing when I got close. I tried calling the landlord. Told him I thought someone had tampered with the air system. He laughed it off. Said the house had no integrated camera system. Said I was probably seeing the pilot light reflection from the old furnace. But I checked. The furnace doesn't even use a pilot light. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. to my phone buzzing. An airdrop request from an unknown device. Madison sleeping.move. My stomach dropped. I didn't accept it. Just stared at the notification until it disappeared. I ripped the covers off my bed, shined my flashlight in every vent, every corner, every outlet. Nothing. That was the last straw. I moved into the campus library for 3 days. Didn't sleep, barely ate. Just walked in circles trying to make sense of it. When I finally came back home, exhausted and half convinced I'd imagined it all, I found the house exactly how I left it. Except for one thing. There was a sticky note on my pillow. No handwriting, just a drawn eye. One wide, bloodshot eye. And underneath it, "You're awake now."